It turns out, it's not easy to get away with hiring a hitman or punching your coworkers, even if you're kinda famous. These are the moments musicians will never live down. Jane's Addiction is broken up nearly as often as they've put out records. It's so common that fans have just started to assume they'll reunite after some time apart. But that doesn't look like it's going to be the case this time. We'd love to actually show you the action here, but the copyright monster might get us. So instead, we'll just break it down. In the middle of a September 2024 show, singer Farrell angrily approached guitarist Dave Navarro, who tried to hold the vocalist back with his hand. A seething Farrell then punched Navarro as other people rushed onto the stage to pull him back. Navarro didn't fight back in the moment, but Jane's Addiction did cancel the rest of their tour in the wake of the violence. In a statement to USA Today, Farrell publicly apologized to his bandmates for his action, but it doesn't look like that was enough. Jane's Addiction's social media has been pretty much silent since the altercation, and some of its members have gone on to start making music together, without Farrell. In the meantime, it looks like Farrell's got a lot of thinking to do.
No responsibility, and I chose that over being a contributing member to society.
Tory Lanez spent much of the 2010s making a name for himself in the rap world, but all that came crashing down in July 2020. When an argument broke out at a Hollywood party, shots were fired and the Canadian rapper wound up behind bars for carrying a concealed weapon. Fellow rapper Megan Thee Stallion's foot had been wounded in the chaos. The injury was initially attributed to broken glass until she stated on her Instagram story that Lanez had actually shot at her as she got out of a car. The legal battle that followed played out for the entire world to see. Lanez even dropped an album denying Megan's claims. Unfortunately for him, those songs didn't hold up in court. He was ultimately sentenced to 10 years behind bars for assault with a semi-automatic firearm, carrying a loaded, unregistered firearm in a vehicle, and discharging a firearm with gross negligence. Speaking before his sentencing, Lanez apologized, stating, "If I could change it, I would, but I can't. Everything I did that night, I take full responsibility. I truly am just trying to be a better person." Flaw might not be the first name that comes to mind when you think of nu metal, but they've hovered around the scene for just as long as many of the bigger acts in the genre have. And in their 30 years as a group, they've dealt with quite a bit of controversy, including that time former guitarist and bassist Tommy Gibbons was accused of plagiarism for using music stolen from YouTubers for Flaw songs. But it was singer Chris Volz who really messed up a few years later. In March 2021, Volz was filmed using a racial slur on stage. Unsurprisingly, the clip got around, and the way Volz handled the backlash was flawed. Instead of addressing the situation head-on, he first released a bizarre and lengthy statement complaining about cancel culture and freedom of expression. When that failed to get people back on his side, he issued a more direct apology on Facebook, writing, "I made a huge mistake, and in the heat of my anger, I used an unacceptable group of words towards another white person. I take responsibility for my actions, apologize for my meltdown, and hope that you can all forgive me." But by then, it was too late. Volz was dropped from his label, and Flaw has continued losing members since this whole mess went down. Icelandic post-rockers Sigur Rós have always pushed the bounds of their sound, often bringing in strange instruments and textures to fill out their atmospheric tracks. By 2018, they'd had years of success under their belts, but made headlines for all the wrong reasons after drummer Orri Páll Dýrason was accused of sexual assault by artist Megan Boyd. Boyd told Pitchfork that the assault happened in January 2013 and reflected, "I just wanted to speak my truth. I sincerely hope it leads to Orri admitting the truth publicly and an apology to me." In light of the allegations, Dýrason announced on Facebook that he was leaving Sigur Rós in October 2018. Whatever transpired between him and Boyd since then has remained private, though Grapevine reports that Dýrason's lawyer tried to get an Icelandic magazine to stop covering the dispute. Dýrason's continued to play shows here and there with other artists, but he hasn't been involved in anything nearly as large-scale as Sigur Rós since. Few bands were a bigger deal in the early 2010s than Mumford & Sons, and while they've now been riding that success for well over a decade, all that stopped for guitarist Winston Marshall in March 2021. It was then that he made a now-deleted post on X praising Andy Ngo's book Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy, and called the author a brave man for writing it. You can probably tell from the book's title where we're going here. Ngo is most famous for his perpetual coverage of Antifa, which makes him a popular right-wing figure, and if you're a popular right-wing figure, that means you're an unpopular left-wing figure. So a lot of Marshall's fans weren't thrilled. Marshall tried to apologize, but people on social media weren't having it. So he left Mumford & Sons and wrote a lengthy article on Medium explaining why. He reflected that he'd been posting about books regularly throughout the pandemic, and claimed he had no idea that posting about No's book in particular would cause such a stir. He wrote, "I failed to foresee that my commenting on a book critical of the far left could be interpreted as approval of the equally abhorrent far right." Now, years after the fact, Marshall seems to have doubled down on his beliefs. He even had No on his podcast.
It is finally happening. I am doing media with the very brave and the very great journalist, Andy No.
Carlos Santana is widely regarded as one of the best guitar players of all time, but maybe he should stick to the fretboard. During a 2023 concert, Santana thought it wise to tell his audience he only believes in two genders, man and woman. To drive that point home, he went on to express his support for comedian Dave Chappelle, who had been in the headlines for his own controversial comments about the transgender community. Clips of Santana's speech quickly found their way around the web, and a lot of people were none too pleased by what they heard. Eventually, Santana issued a statement to Billboard saying, "I am sorry for my insensitive comments. They don't reflect that I want to honor and respect all persons' ideals and beliefs. I realize that what I said hurt people, and that was not my intent. I sincerely apologize to the transgender community and everyone I offended." At a time when metalcore was all the rage, As I Lay Dying was at the top of the game. But that all changed in 2013 when vocalist Tim Lambesis was arrested for trying to end a dispute with his wife in a very permanent way. Lambesis had asked his trainer if he knew a hitman that could get rid of his wife. Soon after, he met with an undercover cop who promptly arrested him. In 2014, Lambesis pled guilty to solicitation of murder and received a 6-year sentence. He was released on parole in December 2016, and he actually reformed As I Lay Dying when he got out. They went on to keep touring for several years, until everyone but Lambesis quit the band in October 2024, largely due to how emotionally taxing being in the band was. Things have only gotten worse for Lambesis since then. Recordings of an argument he had with his new wife have leaked, and videos of him hurting their dog also surfaced online. As I Lay Dying is currently slated to go on a European tour in October 2025, but seeing as Lambesis is currently bandless, we're not optimistic that will play out particularly well.
In the aftermath of the devastating Columbine High School tragedy, America began searching for someone to blame and narrowed in on one person in particular.
Shock rocker Marilyn Manson.
Marilyn Manson.
Marilyn Manson.
Marilyn Manson.
Marilyn Manson.
At the time, Manson was already seen by Middle America as the Antichrist. When word got out that the shooters were goths who had listened to his music, the nation went nuts. In an interview with The Guardian, Manson later revealed, "But honestly, the Columbine era destroyed my entire career at the time." That being said, he claims to understand why he was a target.
Because I think it's easy to throw my face on a TV because I'm, in the end, sort of a poster boy for fear.
His concerts were protested, and he received hundreds of violent threats. The most aggravating part, as Manson later wrote in an article for Rolling Stone, responsible journalists have reported with less publicity that the shooters were not Marilyn Manson fans, and that they even disliked my music. In 2013, singer Michelle Shocked fired off some hateful anti-LGBT comments while playing a club in San Francisco. According to The Guardian, Shocked told the crowd, once Prop 8 gets instated, and once preachers are held at gunpoint and forced to marry the homosexuals, I'm pretty sure that would be the signal for Jesus to come on back. If someone would be so gracious as to please tweet out Michelle Shocked just said from stage, God hates Shocked had been a successful artist, nominated for an MTV Video Music Award alongside Madonna and Sinead O'Connor back in 1990. The controversy left Shocked at the center of a media storm and on the wrong side of her own fans. In a long interview piece with the singer, Dallas Morning News claimed in 2017 that the outburst sent Shocked's career into a near-terminal nosedive, losing her bookings and wiping out a planned tour. In 2003, the Dixie Chicks were one of the biggest acts in country music. Until, that is, they took to a stage in London where lead singer Natalie Maines declared to the crowd her dislike of then-President George W. Bush. "Just so you know, we're on the good side with y'all. We do not want this war, this violence, and we're ashamed that the President of the United States is from Texas." As The Guardian detailed, that was the exact moment the Chicks' career hit the red, white, and blue fan. Country music dropped the all-girl outfit like radioactive waste. Their singles plummeted down the Billboard charts, radio stations banned their music, and they received so many violent threats that they were forced to install metal detectors at their concerts. The Chicks' sales never recovered. In January 2016, hip-hop artist B.o.B decided to take retro to the next level by taking geography back to the Stone Age. In a tweet storm, he fired off pictures and messages designed to prove that we've all been lied to about the shape of the Earth, and that it's actually flat. The series of tweets has come to define what's left of B.o.B's career. His subsequent Twitter spats with guys like astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson have sent him down a rabbit hole that has since consumed his entire life. In September 2017, B.o.B even launched a GoFundMe campaign to raise $1 million to launch satellites into space to find the curve, an impressively obtuse way of saying, to prove the Earth is flat. It doesn't appear this battle will end well for the rapper-turned-explorer.
DJ and songwriter Alan Freed's name is obscure today, but he left behind one heck of a legacy. He's credited with being the guy who coined the term rock and roll through the world's first rock concert and was instrumental in determining the course of post-war American music. Between 1952 and 1957, he was practically the kingmaker of rock and roll. But what happened in 1957? At the time, Freed had a nationally syndicated ABC show, Big Beat, which broadcast his newfangled rock and roll to the entire country. One evening, however, something so unbelievably and unremittingly anti-American happened that the network had no choice but to immediately pull the plug. Big Beat showed a black performer dancing on stage with a white woman. It might sound ridiculous to 21st century ears, but that one interracial dance was enough to get Freed's show canceled. And it couldn't have come at a worse time for Freed, whose health was collapsing and marriage was falling apart. 2 years later, the final blow came. While still on the ropes from his Big Beat controversy, Freed was investigated by the FBI for accepting cash to play records as part of the payola scandal. What was left of his career was over, and he died in 1965 as a penniless alcoholic. The moment that made Ashlee Simpson fade away came during her SNL performance in 2004, when she realized her band was playing the same song she had sung earlier in the show. Unfortunately, the vocals had been pre-recorded. Now, Simpson isn't exactly the first artist to lip-sync a performance, but this practice is almost universally despised by fans, and Simpson was not forgiven for her mistake. According to People, she was relentlessly hounded by critics and former fans simply for the fact that she'd actually dared to engage in deception via lip-syncing. And when she tried to explain that a severe case of acid reflux had prompted her decision to fake the performance, everyone just ended up hating her more. Even today, Simpson hasn't shaken off the experience. The two albums that followed her fateful SNL performance undersold the one she'd been promoting at the time, and she hasn't had a top 10 song since. At least Ashlee Simpson can take comfort in knowing that she's not the only musician to have derailed her own career on Saturday Night Live. In fact, SNL-related career derailment was pioneered in 1992 by Sinead O'Connor, when she sang Bob Marley's War and ended her performance by ripping up a photograph of the Pope. Generally, you're not going to get a good reaction by attacking the Pope on live television in a country where nearly 25% of the population is Catholic. To be fair, however, she was protesting the abuse of children in the Catholic Church, a problem the general public is much more aware of today than it was in 1992. And back then, most Americans were especially clueless about the issue, because at that point it was mostly being brought to light only in Ireland. Still, O'Connor became so unpopular after that little faux pas that she was booed at Bob Dylan's 30th anniversary concert just 2 weeks later. Not long after that, she announced her retirement. She didn't stay retired, of course, but she was never able to quite recapture the success she'd once had.
I was genuinely very angry with what the church were doing. By ripping that picture, I risked my career, everything. I could be a billionaire now if I wanted, if I believed in that.
The Monkees got a lot of shade for being a so-called manufactured band, but they managed to survive for decades because they never lied about what they were. History doesn't remember the 90s pop group Milli Vanilli quite so kindly, because Milli Vanilli was all lies. Frontmen Rob Pilatus and Fab Morvan had basically just lip-synced their way to fame and fortune. And it wasn't Ashlee Simpson-style I have acid reflux lip-syncing either. Pilatus and Morvan didn't even do their own singing in the studio. Their voices were 100% other singers who had been sworn to utmost secrecy. So how did Pilatus and Morvan end up as the faces of Milli Vanilli when other people were doing all the singing? According to Gizmodo, producer Frank Farian thought the real singers were unmarketable, so he hired a couple of models to pretend that they were the ones singing. What he didn't seem to comprehend was that you can't keep a lie that size quiet forever, especially when it got you a Grammy. In 1989, Milli Vanilli was doing a live performance on MTV when the backing track skipped. The media immediately took interest, did some further digging, and discovered that Pilatus and Morvan actually did none of their own singing for the group. Fame does weird things to people, and no one knows that better than George Michael, who was a renowned singer and heartthrob during the 80s. In 1998, Michael was arrested for engaging in a lewd act in a public restroom. You've got to admire his attitude though, because after all that went down, he didn't just crawl into a hole and hide, he actually considered it his moment. The once reclusive Michael was suddenly agreeing to interviews, and by the end of the scandal, he'd gone from a closeted pop star to an out and proud gay pop star. Prior to this incident, Michael had only come out to friends and family, although he had often alluded to it in the lyrics of his songs. Michael's career never really recovered though, at least not in America, where homophobia is still rampant. But to many, Michael is today remembered for publicly embracing his sexuality and helping young gay people feel like they could do the same. In 1990, police seized weapons, pornographic videotapes, marijuana and hashish, and $130,000 in cash from Chuck Berry's home. Not long after that, a bunch of women filed a class action lawsuit against him, alleging that he had video cameras hidden in the bathrooms of his house and a restaurant he owned. Cameras that he would use to record women, some of whom were underage, while they were dressing, undressing, or using the bathroom. In the end, Berry got off pretty lightly. He was charged with drug possession and child abuse, but the child abuse charges were dropped and he was sentenced to just 2 years of unsupervised probation, plus $5,000 paid to a drug rehabilitation program. That seems like nothing, but the incident also cost Berry $1.2 million in legal fees. Although his career wasn't ruined in the sense that he was blacklisted or forced into destitution, pretty much no one could see him live without feeling seriously icky about it. In 2014, CeeLo Green proved that a good career can easily end over a heinous act of violence. Green's career-defining moment was the one in which he took to Twitter to dubiously proclaim his innocence after he was accused of indecently assaulting an unconscious woman. And then he also tweeted some nonsensical stuff about how you can't be with someone if you're unconscious, which just served to make him look even more guilty than he had before. Somehow, Green managed to squirm his way out of the allegations and was convicted only on a lesser charge of supplying drugs, because fame is powerful. He got 3 years probation and community service, but his career never really recovered. And the most notable thing he's done since was a performance during the opening ceremonies at the 2017 World Aquatics Championship in Budapest, as well as some voice work on the children's animated series Teen Titans Go.
British guitarist Eric Clapton is the only person to have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 3 times. He's also the only musician to have sparked an anti-racism movement in direct response to a speech he made. In 1976, British race relations were at an all-time low, led by white supremacist Parliament member Enoch Powell. That's when a drunk Eric Clapton walked on stage in Birmingham and yelled, "Enoch was right, I think we should send them all back." And the rest of Clapton's speech was no better. He said Britain was becoming a, quote, black colony, and his audience should vote to keep Britain white. While Clapton's outburst didn't get him completely canceled, it permanently stained his career in his home country where, 40 years later, his name is still synonymous with racism. There was a time when Kanye West was hailed as a groundbreaking artist, thanks to a string of hits and collaborations with everyone from Jay-Z and Rihanna to Daft Punk and Jamie Foxx. In recent years, however, West has become better known for his outlandish antics and controversial statements than his music. And for many, the last straw came on October 9, 2022, when West unleashed a torrent of anti-Semitic messages on X. It started in the podcast Drink Champs, where West boasted,
"I could say anti-Semitic things and Adidas can't drop me."
He was wrong. Adidas dropped West, slashing around $900 million of his estimated net worth. Combine this with a number of other lost business partnerships, significant public outrage, and various labels and agencies disowning him, and it's clear that West's reputation has taken a hit from which he may never recover. In 2013, singer Robin Thicke scored a massive hit with his single Blurred Lines, which went on to cause enough controversy to last a lifetime.
It literally blurred the lines between a woman's right to say no and a man forcing himself.
British student unions started banning the song, and several media outlets called attention to its uncomfortable lyrics, which many felt landed on the wrong side of sexual consent. It didn't help that the song became associated with Thicke's MTV Video Music Awards performance alongside Miley Cyrus. After which, Cyrus told the New York Times that Thicke explicitly requested that she wear as little as possible. Thicke has managed to pivot into a gig as a talent show panelist, but his musical success hasn't come close to what it was before the Blurred Lines outcry. In 2019, the song's co-writer Farrell Williams told GQ that he came to dislike the song's lyrical content once he understood its full context. What's more, actor Emily Ratajkowski, who starred in the Blurred Lines video, alleged in her book My Body that Thicke groped her during filming. In 2003, 4 fans sued the band Creed because they felt a December 2002 Chicago area concert was bad. A judge dismissed the lawsuit in 2003, but Creed never recovered, and the band broke up in 2004 after a long dormant period. In a 2004 interview with MTV News, singer Scott Stapp said he considered the lawsuit to be a major factor in their implosion, stating, "Everybody didn't sue. It wasn't a class action suit. I think what got Mark Tremonti upset was that it was his hometown, and 2 people in the newspapers were bashing his band." The reason the fans filed the lawsuit was Stapp's allegedly visible intoxication during the show. Stapp has a history of addiction and mental health issues, which continued after Creed broke up and contributed to a breakdown in 2014. In a 2019 interview with Nightline, Stapp appeared to be in a better place, admitting, "When you start mixing alcohol and substances to self-medicate, that's a toxic combination. That can create a human being that is so far removed from who you are because of the chemicals inside of you that you can say and do some pretty nasty things." Singer and jazz pianist Hazel Scott was one of the biggest celebrities of the 1940s. Apart from her music career, she appeared in TV shows and movies. She even hosted the short-lived The Hazel Scott Show. Most impressively, she was a black artist who actively fought racism, refusing to play segregated venues or appear in projects that depicted black people as stereotypes. But Scott's willingness to challenge the powers that be was her career's undoing. She was falsely accused of communist sympathies, and although she voluntarily appeared before the House Un-American Activities Committee to defend herself, she was blacklisted. Scott and her family moved to Paris, but while she continued both her artistry and her activism, her career never recovered. In the early 1980s, Billy Squier's songs were a fairly common sight in the charts. But in 1984, his fate was sealed by the release of the video for his single Rock Me Tonight. Not only do many professionals consider it abysmal, but Squier agreed. In the book I Want My MTV, Squier says, "It was diabolical. I looked at it and went, what the f*** is this?" 1984 was the year of Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA and U2's The Unforgettable Fire, when plainclothes rockers ruled and the great hair metal albums had only started emerging. In other words, it was a bad time for a campy music video featuring satin sheets and the artist's bare chest. Not to mention the awkward, crawling, hand-flapping choreo performed by Squier himself. Just like that, Squier's rise to rock's upper echelons was effectively over.